This week, it's Theranos Part 2, the epilogue. I'm going to tell you why has this board got so much orange writing on it, and how do entrepreneurs get in damn big trouble the way Elizabeth Holmes is. Theranos. A year ago, I did part 1 of the case study. As a matter of fact, it was August of 2017, and it's a little bit less than a year from right now as we're filming this. I went through and looked at everything, and it was clear that there was fraud, lies, deceptions, and big problems and suits. But so much more, even worse, has come. Let's look at a quick run through history to catch you up a little bit. If you're interested, go watch that full case study. We're following up on a series we did last week on failures, and this one was a pretty big failure. Theranos. But I'll catch you up a little bit here, and then I'm going to take you through 2 things. One, how do entrepreneurs get in trouble? What are those things in the psyche of an entrepreneur that causes them to lose track of truth and to lose track of reality and to stay in a mode of denial and run forward and end up in big trouble? And how's the way it's supposed to work? There's a structure to venture capital with milestones along the way, and I'm going to take you through that, which will be an important lesson for all of you that are about to walk that path for your business. Theranos. You'll recall last year in the case study, I made an interesting flub. I said she dropped out of Harvard, even though the title of the video, we said she dropped out of Stanford, because I was thinking about all these dropouts like Gates and Zuckerberg that had dropped out of Harvard. But to be clear, she drops out of Stanford and then goes and builds the company. Through amazing contacts in her family, she gets George Shultz, who was Secretary of State at one point in time, Henry Kissinger, also Secretary of State at one time, and an amazing board of directors that were helping other people be confident. I think that was one of the first problems. People were believing in and confident in a board of director that had no medical experience, but they had plenty of celebrity cachet, secretaries of states, pillars of government. But those aren't the people that are going to write peer review and get your product passed by the FDA. Nonetheless, it was people that caused investors such as Tim Draper, Rupert Murdoch, and Larry Ellison to be very excited about it and be, wow, what a whiz kid this Stanford dropout is, and look at all the people on the board. So there was a lot of enthusiasm that went along that way, and along the way there's a suicide of a prominent researcher inside Theranos. And the first thing Elizabeth Holmes does is, over a 24-hour period, worries about getting his laptop back and securing company data. Why the secrecy? Didn't want people to know. Didn't want to dive in and find the truth. Well, there's a lot of people that question that, and there's even some calls for folks who really want to investigate the suicide and find out what was on this guy's mind that was so tumultuous, so deep that he would off himself. Nonetheless, it brought some early seeds of doubt, but the PR machine and an amazing board was in full speed, driving full ahead. Before long, we're 10 years into the Theranos lie, and guess where? Suddenly, she's becoming a household name. The cover of Forbes on June 30th, 2014. Then, Forbes 400. The Forbes 400 is the list of billionaires, and suddenly she's the youngest self-made female billionaire on the list. Then, Inc. magazine calls her the next Steve Jobs. I happen to think that title is a little bit clickbaity, but nonetheless, Inc. was up in the same PR cyclone that everybody else was and putting her on the cover. Then truth comes in the form of the Wall Street Journal and a brave reporter named John Carreyrou, who fought against people that tried to intimidate him, push the story back, but he did his research and did what now we all know was a fabulous reporting job in his book, Bad Blood. So if you want to see the entire story step by step by step, you can read Bad Blood. I'm going to take you through why I think Elizabeth Holmes ran the red light and kept perpetuating a lie, how you can avoid it, and how the venture capital cycle has natural red light, green lights. It's also an important lesson for you. So when she runs her last red light, she ends up with an 11-count indictment. Once upon a time, she was a darling of the media on the cover of the Forbes 400 issue, and a member of the Forbes 400 means she was one of the youngest female billionaires ever on the list, but that's all gone now. What isn't going to change is the fact forever in history she's going to be known as the girl that started this company, had all these amazing people on her board, and then ended up with an 11-count indictment. 11 counts. And there's only one word for that, and that is damn! You managed to turn 11 years into an 11-count indictment. That's pretty cool stuff. I hope she ends up in Danbury. And by the way, that's kind of the reason that I've made everything orange, because I think it's a color she needs to get used to, as opposed to wearing black and impersonating Steve Jobs or claiming that she was inspired and she was no Steve Jobs. I don't know who she was. Now, this 11-count indictment, I think, should be treated differently than a white-collar crime because you deceived an investor and you're making a social media app. Why do I think that? Well, both are lies, and those investors get hurt bad by the loss of their money. But this is biotech. People are going into Walgreens thinking they could just have their little child's finger pricked so it won't be so traumatic to have blood taken, and they can find out things to make health decisions about their kids. That's not a social media app. That is running red lights and lying about it, as the public is depending on this as they make health decisions about themselves, family, and kids. No bueno. I hope that this 11-count indictment is pressed hard by the federal government and that she actually does time. Now let's shift to how did it happen to Elizabeth Holmes and why does it happen to some entrepreneurs? A lot of you have asked me to dive deeper into the why and wherefores involved at the base of the case study rather than just taking you on a tour through the history. Well, I think there is a tour of history that was needed today to kind of catch us up a little bit, but now I want to go here. And where here is, I believe there is an intersection of 2 points. And the first was ego, and the second was hubris. Ego, it's this unbridled, passionate conviction that you can do it, that nothing can stand in your way. And you have a huge ego about your abilities, your opinion, and you're kind of unassailable for people to talk to you. And when you have a hyperinflated ego, there's usually control things that you find in those organizations. People with a big ego don't like to admit they're wrong, and sometimes they'll control information flows coming to and from them. That was something Elizabeth Holmes did. And then on this side, there's hubris, excessive self-arrogance, denial of truth and prohibit truth from getting to you. I believe these came together in the case of Elizabeth Holmes, and you see that little drop of blood? That is truth slowly bleeding to death as she perpetuated the lies and denials. High control systems, secrecy, it was ego and hubris and denial and control coming together, ultimately the death of truth. That's what happened. What do the courts call it? Fraud, perjury, lies, deception, and those are words that ended up in the 11-count indictment. I think this is a risk that entrepreneurs can run into. You need people around you to help keep your ego in check. I'm sure you've heard the phrase. You also need people there to draw down your hubris if your excessive self-confidence is preventing you from looking with transparency and reality at the results are in front of you. We all want our startups to work. We all believe if you just give us one more day, one more round of financing, one more shot, that we'll be able to get the business to here. But we need people around us to say, Doc, it's time to stop working. This patient's dead. And it hurts, and it's failure, but it's also a learning. Nonetheless, if this happens, those companies will run right off the cliff by arrogant CEOs full of pride, ego, and hubris, and every dollar that's on the shelf is burned to death in the process. Probably 1 or 2 more rounds of venture funding than are necessary. Now, I'm not making excuses for Elizabeth Holmes. I believe this can happen to a lot of people, but once you cross the line, and she certainly did, she is forever accountable and liable for the lies, deceptions, and fraud, which were crimes. Now let's go to something a little more upbeat, because I think I'm very clear when I say I believe she should be in jail for what she did. Spare us the trial, plea it, take your 24 months, but she should do time. Nonetheless, that's how I feel. Let's move over here to something a little more upbeat and look at how the process should work, which should be a lesson for entrepreneurs. This is how it should work, and if you avoid this, you can let this do its thing. We have here a concept and an entrepreneur, maybe you, and we have a need for investment. Maybe the first investment is bootstrapping, taking dollars, usually less than $50,000, where you don't take a salary, you use what you can, you scrape together $50,000. Maybe not it's all at once. Maybe it's over a period of 6 months where you work part-time jobs and you're putting money in your pocket and you're working late coding. Nonetheless, the bootstrapping process is just that. It's bootstrapping where you're trying to get your idea to a certain milestone. When you reach that first green light and you say, I think I have proved through my bootstrapping and what I've done that there's something here, I believe it's a green light, and you go get seed financing. That could be friends and family or others. Nonetheless, if you proceed down here from seed to Series A to Series B and you move along, you also could move along to say, you know what, this isn't turning out the way I wanted, and perhaps you pivot. And as you pivot, you can be on a new line, also with red lights or green lights as you move forward. Lastly, there's the line where you simply admit defeat. A lot of people want to blame the fact they couldn't get further investment. Every time, literally every time I've questioned and dove into it, it's usually one of two things: product or market. The market wasn't ready, or the market didn't take the product because the product wasn't right. There you have it. It's rarely related to, oh, we just simply ran out of money, but we had this incredible, great product. You know, you could argue that, but I have most often seen in the three keys, product, team, and market, that product and market are the two where you miss on product or you miss market timing. You could reach a red light after pitching 50 people when you're running out of money, and then you blame it on the fact that none of them invested. Now, wait a minute. What was in there? Was it perhaps that you were living in a little bit of a dream, and after 50 people, you couldn't find one that believed more money should be put in this for the next milestone? It's a process that works, but you need people around you to control your ego and to control the influx of hubris so we can transparently and objectively look at the business and say, we have got this, we believe in it, we just need to get a little more funds and move here, and we're going to find an investor that believes in it with us. Or, guys, we've gone to 70 investors. None of them believe it. It's either product or market. There's a variety of opinions are out there, but we've reached the end of the line, and there's no technology we can take here and pivot. So thank you for the ride. We're done. Go back and look at my case study we did on Uber, and you're going to see how Travis Kalanick was part of some startups that actually failed. They made him stronger as a CEO as he built Uber. And we all know that he had his flaws and everything that went with it, and he lost his job for that, for the culture and for things that were happening there. But if you go back and look at the development of him as a CEO, part of this failure process, this red light process that he went through early in his career, is part of the learning and the refining process of some of the greatest entrepreneurs out there. I hope those two lessons about how ego and hubris can come together to kill truth and make a huge problem for you as the entrepreneur, and how the process that you're going to go through with its natural red light, green light process is very helpful so that you understand where you are and you see this as a compass. I'm going to do an extended educational program on this in the near future that I think you'll find valuable. So what do you think about Theranos? Leave some comments below. How do you feel that this is shaking out for her? Should other things have happened? We want to hear your opinion, and it also helps me craft my next case studies. You can also follow me on Instagram and Facebook, where I have a new business page, and please subscribe to Valuetainment. And remember, we're on a mission to get to 1 million subscribers, and when we do, the first annual Valuetainment Entrepreneur Conference featuring Patrick Bet-David, yours truly, the Biz Doc, and other leaders talking about entrepreneurship as we seek to make you better, your company better, your employees better, and the people you serve with that company, friends and families and customers, better still. Until next time, I'm Tom Ellsworth, the Biz Doc, and I hope I left you better than I found you.